Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to my virtual class. I'm Safia Sultan, your online history instructor for class 8s. Hope this video finds you happy, healthy and in a very good shape. One of the most sincere forms of respect is actually listening to what another person has to say. Children, most of the conflicts in our lives arrive when we do not listen to others. You know, so let's respect each other's point of view and try to give time to others and listen to their viewpoint to avoid as much conflicts as we can. Okay, Jill. So actually today it's the last topic from the chapter Communal and Political Awakening. And actually we are going to enter in the new topic, which is going to be the political agreements and disagreements happening in India. So let's have a quick recap about what we discussed in the last class, children. In the last class, we majorly discussed about the contributions of Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Allama Dr. Muhammad Iqbal in the awakening of the Muslims and safeguarding their political rights. We particularly discussed about the significance of the poetry of Iqbal, which really awakened the Muslims. It really made Muslims understand their destination and struggle for it. And then we definitely in detail discussed about the 14 points of Jinnah, which played a strong role in safeguarding the political rights of the Muslims. Because if we talk about the previous event, which was the presentation of Nehru report, some of the clauses and points mentioned in the Nehru report were absolutely against the Muslim rights. So today, inshallah, children, by the end of the lesson, we will be able to understand the purpose of the Salt March, which is the upcoming event, and we will be able to analyze the reasons for the failure of the round table conferences. So you can easily understand that the two major events we are going to discuss today are going to be the Salt March, or in other words, the civil disobedience movement, and it's going to be the three round table conferences. Yes, so let's start with the Great Salt March. What is it? Why it happened? How did it happen? And what was its impact? So let's start with why did this civil disobedience movement start? Children, actually, it all started from Britain's Salt Act, which was presented in 1882. You all know salt is a very common commodity in Indian houses and even in the world. We do not cook without salt, so it's a very basic thing we all need. And it's a very cheap commodity and available everywhere. But British came up with a Salt Act which prohibited Indians from collecting or selling salt, which is a staple item of their diet. And Indian citizens were forced to buy the vital minerals from the British rulers, who, in addition to exercising a monopoly over the manufacture and sale of salt, also charged a heavy salt tax. If we talk about the period before the British Salt Act, people never paid for that salt. They just go and pick it up from there and just go and sell it and even use it for themselves. And it was a very disappointing situation for the Indian people when they started paying some money against buying the salt. And it's not only a little amount, they were somehow paying the salt tax as well, which was becoming the British property. And this situation was taken up very well by the Indian leaders, the ones who were awakened now, and they are really concerned about the Indian rights. So Gandhi at that time realized that it is wrong and someone should raise voice against it. Children, if I talk about how did this salt march start, so it actually started by Gandhi. He sent a letter to Viceroy Lord Irwin, and he stated to him that he and the other of his friends would begin the breaking of the salt laws in another 10 days. And then on March 12, 1930, Gandhi set out from his ashram. Ashram is, a religious place where he was staying, and he was along with his several dozen followers moving towards the coastal town of Dandi, which is on the Arabian Sea. It's in Gujarat. You can see on your screens the picture of Gandhi, who started moving. The lady next to him is Sarojini Naidu, who was another very famous figure in the Indian politics. So you can easily say that it was not only Gandhi rising against the British, it's every every group of people from India, including men, women, youngsters, are rising against the British. Now we are going to watch a small video to see and understand what was Salt March.
Civil disobedience. Mahatma Gandhi agitated against British government by starting another movement, that is, civil disobedience. Civil disobedience means to violate unjust and oppressive laws formed by British government politely. Mahatma Gandhi accelerated civil disobedience movement to decrease the tax on the salt. Every Indian had to bear the load of salt tax. It was also the demand of Congress to cancel the tax of salt. Mahatma Gandhi selected the place Dandi of Gujarat for breaking the salt tax by using passive political resistance movement. Gandhiji started his journey with selected followers on 12th March 1930. Mahatma Gandhi and his followers started the journey from Sabarmati to Dandi and crossed 385 kilometers in 25 days by walking. He violated the law by preparing salt from the seashore of Dandi. Then the movement of civil disobedience started all over India.
Yes. So this is how the civil disobedience started when Gandhi picked up the salt from the coastal area of Gujarat and Dandi. That was the beginning of the civil disobedience, people, going against the British government. Okay, now once the salt march started and ended up and it took the shape of the civil disobedience movement, it's important to discuss about the results of the salt march. Children, Indians became strong enough to stand for their rights. Now they are no more scared of the British or no more very much agreed upon whatever British say them to do. Then the biggest blow to the British benefits was that the British goods and goods were boycotted. Nobody was buying them. Major Congress leaders were arrested, and then Congress and Muslim League both continued to reject the British proposals for the constitutional settlement. Now British government is losing patience because they are desperately trying to draft the future constitution since they sent the Simon Commission to India. So they decided to call the leaders and state owners to London for discussion. Children, you might find this word state owners a little uh, technical here because we all know about the Indian leaders who are belonging to the different communities. But if I talk about the state owners, we need to discuss about a very important geographical fact about India, and that is if I talk about the roundtable conferences, what are these states in India? If you see on your screens, children, here, let me put this. Okay, so if you see the screen, it is divided in two colors. The darker one shows you the princely states, and the lighter one shows you the British India. If you see these areas, you know, they are the princely states, the private ownership, the lands owned privately. We have a very big state, Hyderabad in the bottom. We have Mysore. See, all these Balochistan states, they are all the stakeholders of this problem. Rest of the area, Indian leaders can handle. But if you have to talk about the matters of Hyderabad, if you have to talk about the matters of Jammu and Kashmir and the other many, many states spread all over India, you have to call them also if you are deciding something related to India. So finally, now state owners were also given importance and they were called in the round table conference, because finally British thought that the solution to this problem is to call all the Indian leaders to London and make them sit together and decide something about the future constitution. So along with the Indian leaders, they called the state owners also, some very prominent state owners, not all of them, because it was not one or two. There were more than 550 private states in India before partition. Okay, now if we talk about the agenda of the conferences, why these conferences were called by the British. So, children, they were the series of peace conferences. There were three conferences planned in 1930, 1931, and 1932. And the plan was to keep the venue same, which was London. And they were organized by the British government, and the Indian political personalities were supposed to come to discuss the future constitution of India. And British desperately wanted to control the poor law and order situation of India also, because there are now rising conflicts between Indians and British, and even there are rising conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, and this British cannot handle. Okay, so let's start with the first round table conference. Children, there were 58 political leaders from British India and 16 delegates from the princely states. I again repeat, 16 delegates, 16 from the princely state, which we have just discussed in the previous slide. They all attended the conference. However, the Indian National Congress kept away from the conference. Many of them were in jail for their participation in the civil disobedience movement. We discussed in the previous slide only, children, that after the Salt March, several Indian leaders, including Gandhi, were jailed. And in the same time, in the meanwhile, started the conference, and everyone went to London, but these leaders, the Congress leaders, couldn't go to London because they were in jail. Since the major leaders of the biggest party were not there, you can easily assume that this conference could not meet its expectations. Several meetings were held, but it was difficult to progress in the absence of Gandhi. Some advances were made, like they believed that yes, dominion status should be given to the India. They somehow talked on the rights to be given to the minorities also. But majorly nothing could be decided, because Gandhi, along with the other very important political figures from Congress's side, were not present in the first roundtable conference. Right, coming to the second roundtable conference. Children, when we talk about the second roundtable conference, especially Gandhi was released from jail and he was asked to go to London to attend this conference, so that this conference at least, becomes a result oriented one and comes up with some suggestions, concrete suggestions about the future constitution of India. So conference did not, again, it was almost a failure because of the issue of the separate electorate. In the since from the Nehru report, now Hindus are demanding that there should be no separate electorate and elections should be joint ones. Gandhi insisted that only Congress represents all of India and other parties should not be considered much, because like Gandhi clearly stated that whatever you want to talk about India, whatever you decide about India, you should be only and only talking to the Congress, since it's secular in nature, and it represents all the communities of India, including Muslims, Sikhs, lower caste, and even the Hindus. So they said you should not consider any other political party, and every matter of India should be decided with the Congress only. So definitely the other parties present in that conference did not like this idea. They were very upset and they refused to follow this. And that is the reason this conference also was a failure. He also rejected the idea of giving political rights to a lower caste, his own religion people, and demanded majority rule, which means that everything should be in the hands of the Hindus only. And this resulted in the failure of the conference, because definitely the other communities which are present there will never ever accept on this point. Okay, so now coming to the third roundtable conference, which was held in the year 1932. As I told you, venues were same, they were held in London. Third, and the last session was, the weakest one, because only 46 delegates attended, and most of the main political figure of India were not present. Not even Jinnah and not even Gandhi attended the third roundtable conference. The Labour Party from Britain, Mr. Jinnah, and the Indian National Congress refused, which made it a very weak gathering because the decision taking authorities were missing from this conference. And that is the reason this conference produced no results. All three attempts of the British to bring the politicians to London and decide the future constitution of India failed. Now British are very desperate and they decided that they will work with the willing parties only in future because they really are in a need to draft the future constitution. Okay, children, so it's time to reflect. Children, today we discussed mainly about the Salt March, which was announced by Gandhi, and it was in a way that he refused to accept the laws related to the buying and selling of salt designed and prepared by the British. And that really, initiated the Indian people against the British, and they started the non-cooperation movement. And the worst thing which could happen to the British was that the British products were boycotted. And that is the most effective things Indian could do to the British. Then we discussed that chaos, there was a lot of chaos in the Indian society, which made drafting of the future constitution a difficult task. And to solve this problem, British called three conferences in London to sit to allow the Indian politicians to sit together and decide their future constitution. And unfortunately, all these three uh, conferences failed. So I hope everything we have discussed today is very much clear to you, and further you can discuss them with your teachers in your physical classes. Inshallah, next week we will meet with some new learning, with some new events. Till then, take special care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.